What is up, guys? It's your friendly neighborhood web war fanatic, and today I got another deck building video for you guys. So a lot of people have been requesting that I make a protection deck building video, and I don't have any new ideas for anything, but I thought what better than to go back to a previous deck that I made before for Spider-Man Peter Parker, and this is a protection deck for him. And we're going to be going into the deck building process of how I built this deck, because I feel like that this deck is a little bit unique because I built it specifically to tech for Venom Goblin. So I think it's going to be interesting to go through that process, and it's going to be easy for me to explain why each card is in there specifically, because this was built for a specific villain. Normally, whenever I'm building a deck, I will plan to just have a deck be kind of like a well-rounded deck that can take down every single scenario. And particularly what I'll keep in mind is Ronin and Venom Goblin. And then if it's a particular hero that I feel like can't do it, or if I'm building a weaker deck, I'll usually aim for Magneto and Loki and everything weaker than that. But yeah, this deck is a little bit different in that it was specifically for Venom Goblin. So I think it's important whenever you're building a deck to first have a goal in mind of what you want that deck to accomplish, right? Are you building it for thematic reasons because you want to be fun? Are you building it to use a specific combo, or do you want to defeat a specific villain? So this deck, the main reason that I started building this deck was really because I played a game using a all basic card deck against Venom Goblin, and then I got some feedback where a lot of people were saying that Peter Parker is only good because of those allies and because I swarmed with a bunch of the basic web warrior allies. So this deck was kind of to show that he doesn't need that many allies. So I only have 5 added allies to this deck here. So a total of 6, including Black Cat, his hero specific ally, which we must include in the deck. And that's still a decent amount of allies, but definitely a lot less than my usual number, which I usually like to go for at least 8, and preferably more. But yeah, this is kind of a little bit less allies than I was used to. It's just kind of to show that how Peter can play without as many allies, but still with some. And yeah, that's kind of the intention of this deck. So I'm just explaining. So I think it's important to know what you're building a deck for. So I'm just giving you guys a backstory of why I built this specific deck. So for Venom Goblin here, and I also have Venom Goblin pulled up right here. So the main thing with Venom Goblin is that he has these 3 main schemes right here, right? Upper Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, and Lower Manhattan. So there's going to be a lot of threat removal needed to take down the scenario. And the Venom Goblin, what he does is he deals each player 2 face down counter cards whenever you start the game if you're playing on expert, because we start with stage 2, and on stage 3 he's going to deal the face down or do each player 3 face down encounter cards. So that's a bunch of encounter cards. He has Steady on the stage 2, and he has Stalwart and Retaliate on the stage 3. So I think Stun and Confuse is not going to be as viable on Venom Goblin unless you're playing here that has so much Stun and Confuse that it's super easy for them to get Venom Goblin like blocked off in his activation, even though he has a Steady, because you can just place like 2 statuses every single turn. But yeah, Venom Goblin has a tie-in to his activations. Claim and Throne right here. So every single time he activates against you, afterwards you move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat and resolve a special. So he's going to be constantly resolving the special abilities of these 3 main schemes right here. So this one is discard a card from your hand. This one is to take 2 indirect damage, and then this one is to place 1 threat on each scheme. So if he activates, it'll go to one of them, you might put threat on all the schemes. And if he activates again, you might have to take indirect damage, and if he activates again, you might have to discard a card from your hand, which can be really brutal. Okay, so against Venom Goblin here, we're playing in protection. And the thing with Venom Goblin is, in protection, is that I feel like a lot of times when you're playing in protection, you want the hero to exhaust to make a basic defense. Or if the hero is not exhausting, you want the hero itself to be the character that's making the defense, not an ally blocking. And I think that that is a fun and thematic way to play, to have the hero be the one actually defending and not just throwing an ally like to chump block for you. But unfortunately, it's a little bit harder for the higher difficulties because a lot of these villains hit super duper hard. So if we take a look at Venom Goblin's cards right here, he has where is the card I'm looking for? Oh, that's not in his, okay, so this is in his recommended set here. It's called Swinging Assault. Let me find it at the bottom. Okay, Swinging Assault right here is a treachery card that Venom Goblin can get. And when reviewed in Alter Ego, you change the hero form and the villain attacks you. And if this card is reviewed in hero form, the villain attacks you, and then give the villain 1 additional boost card for that activation. So Venom Goblin can easily get a second boost card and he's hitting you for super duper hard because he already has 3 attack here on expert mode, and then he could get a nasty attachment like We Are One, which gives him +3 scheme and +3 attack, and then he might also pull the boost of the symbiotic monstrosity, where if this activation is attack, it deals indirect damage. Yeah, he just has a lot of way to put a bunch of damage on your identity. And actually, I kind of misspoke with here for the indirect damage, because if it's indirect damage, it actually works better that you're defending, because when you exhaust to defend, you minus your defense through that indirect damage, so that it's less indirect damage. So this is actually really bad for chump blocking, like with an ally. But yeah, Venom Goblin just has so many ways to where you can ramp up really quickly and deal a lot of damage to a player through a regular attack. So if you're constantly defending here with protection, then you may take a lot of damage suddenly, right? Venom Goblins often hit me for 10 damage, 11 damage, 12 damage. And sometimes he hits you for very low, right? Because a lot of his cards here have boost effects and no boost icons. So if you get the Symbiote Berserker, for example, as his boost card, and it only has one boost card, then he's gonna add no boost icons to that, and he's only gonna be hitting you for 3 attack, right? So he has such a high variance that sometimes you can easily block out all the damage, and sometimes you won't be able to. So that's kind of Venom Goblin's shtick. He has very high variance in his attacks, and he can randomly hit you for like 11, 12, or he can just do like 3 or 4 damage. So the thing with perfect defense, that's kind of the strategy or the archetype known in Marvel Champions, where you're supposed to make a basic defense and you don't take any damage. So for example, a key card in that is Unflappable right here. So let me just go to the card. Okay, so it says right here, it's a 1-cost upgrade, play under any player's control. After you defend against an attack and take no damage, exhaust Unflappable and you can draw a card. So this is a really good card because it's only 1 cost, and ideally you can defend every single turn and then draw a card, right? But you have to take no damage. And I think that there's so many ways to improve your defense to where you're taking no damage. But if you're facing a villain like Venom Goblin or a villain like Ronin, there's no way to completely guarantee that you won't take any damage, because they might ramp up like crazy and then just give you like extra boosts and stuff like that, right? So Venom Goblin also has a in his recommended set, the Goblin gear. Did I pass by it? Let's see. So right here, the Goblin gear. Yeah, Goblin gear right here. He might get the remote navigation as a boost, where you give the villain 2 additional boost cards for his activation, right? And if you combine that with the +1 attack stuff here with his concussive bombs, incendiary bombs, and smoke bombs, or if you combine that with, let me see, back to the other modular set. And he can also have improvised weapons, right, where he gets an amplify. So if you combine with amplify and you're getting a bunch of boost cards, which has definitely happened to me, then if you're getting 3 boost cards, that's already 3 more boost icons, ignoring all the regular boost icons that come on the cards itself. So he can easily swing for a lot, and you won't really know, right? You just take that huge hit. Go back up to Venom Goblin here. So that's kind of the problem with perfect defense for Venom Goblin. So I kind of built this deck, and this deck is named Imperfect Defense because it's perfect defense sometimes, which is why we have the Inflappable, but most of the times we don't really want to go after perfect defense because it's not going to work for us. So a key card in this deck is going to be Backflip, right? That's a Spider-Man hero specific card. 0-cost event, when you would take any amount of damage from an attack, prevent all that damage. So this is one of the best cards for perfect defense because it has a defense keyword, so it counts as Spider-Man defending, and then he doesn't have the exhaust, and you can see the boost card first, and you just negate all the boost icons, and it becomes 0 because Backflip prevents all the damage. So if you play a Backflip, you successfully defended against enemy attack because it has a defense keyword. You didn't exhaust, and you can still trigger Unflappable, where you can draw a card. And then another perfect defense card that I have in this deck is a Hard to Ignore. So it's a 1-cost upgrade. As a hero response after your hero defends against an attack and takes no damage, exhaust Hard to Ignore and remove 1 threat from the main scheme. So this is very important for Venom Goblin here because he has so much threat on the 3 main schemes. It's very useful to be able to use the Hard to Ignores, and we can have 3 copies of it in play at the same time. So 3 copies can remove a lot of that threat from those main schemes. So that's kind of what we're going for there. But the only way for Spider-Man to trigger that is through the Backflip. And he has other ways to, or other heroes have a bunch of other ways to prevent damage. But if you're preventing the damage, like adding 2 defense, or if you have the armor and you get +1 defense, that may not prevent all that damage still, right? Because Venom Goblin can still hit, like what we talked about earlier. he has three base attack. So if you're defending for like let's say 6, he can still hit for 7 or 8 randomly, and you won't even know. And until the boosts are reviewed, so it's such a high variance that it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what he's gonna do. And because of that, unflappable and hard to ignore is not consistent every single turn. But every single turn that for Spider-Man, whenever he has a backflips, it is consistent. So that's why I kind of named this deck Imperfect Defense, because it's contingent on Spider-Man having the backflip in his hand to make the perfect defense engine work. And on every other turn that we don't have the backflips in our hand, we have to rely on stuff like an Owl, like Nick Fury to block, or Black Cat to block, or Daredevil to block, right? We need to rely on the allies to chump block first whenever we don't have the perfect defense engine going, because we don't have the backflips. And then no other card, or not many other cards, can help do what the backflip does, especially in the protection aspect. So there are some other hero identity specific cards that can prevent all the damage, like Captain America and his shield block, but there's no way to have that consistency and that strength in a protection event. So yeah, we're kind of really relying on the backflip to get the perfect defense engine running. And there's one other key card that I put in this deck that helps a lot with that, and that's going to be the Defiance right here. So this is our only defense event in this protection deck. So it's a zero cost event, just like the backflip. Man, I love zero cost defense events because when I'm playing a defense event or when I'm playing a card on the villain phase, I lose that card from my hand when the player phase begins, right? So let's say if I have 5 cards in my hand because I end the turn hero form, if I spend 1, I'll start the hero phase with only 4 cards in my hand now, which is not that good because now I can't play whatever I want to play, or I just have less resources, right? Spider-Man does have his hero ability Spider Sense where you can draw a card back, but it's still very limiting. So if you have to pay a resource to actually put the protection like event down, then you're losing even more cards in your hand, and you might have 3 or 2 cards left in your hand during hero phase. And I like to have big hero turns. I want to do a lot during my actual turn, so I prefer to be able to play a lot of cards. So I love a zero cost defense event here. So Defiance here is a hero interrupt as a defense, has a defense keyword, so it counts as defending, which is great. And then when a boost card on an enemy attacking you will be turned face up, you discard instead. So this is my big tech card against Venom Goblin. So Venom Goblin here has 3 attack. And then Spider-Man, Peter Parker, has 3 defense right here, right? So if Venom Goblin's attacking with the 3, and then Spider-Man, Peter Parker is defending for 3, he won't take any damage if the boost is 0. And what the Defiance does and why it will work really well against Venom Goblin is because whenever a boost card on an enemy is turned face up, you discard instead. So it discards all the boost effects, right, like the all that stuff, and it also discards all the boost icons. So if Venom Goblin does not have an attachment on him, it guarantees that I'll be able to trigger the perfect defense stuff with Unflappable and Hard to Ignore with just a Defiance, right? So the goal is to, whenever Venom Goblin has like a bunch of stuff, right, like if he has the We Are One, where he gets +3 attack, then Defiance is not going to be useful at all, right? We want to use the backflips. If we have Defiance, it's not going to be that good because we're still going to be taking at least 6 damage from him, right, with the 3 plus the 3 base attack. But then if the Defiance isn't, or if the backflip, I forgot what I was talking about. So, oh yeah, but if he doesn't have any attachments, then the Defiance is very useful to knowing for a fact that we can defend all the attack. We can defend all the damage from his attack without knowing what the boost is, because the boost is what makes Venom Goblin so unpredictable, but the Defiance will cancel that out. So it's a way to gain consistency on his defense. And yeah, so we have 3 copies of that. And basically what this deck is kind of revolving around is Unflappable, Hard to Ignore, and then using backflips and defense and Defiance to get through the villain phase, right? We want to try to get through the villain phase as soon as possible and survive it so we can do stuff during the player phase. So that's kind of what we're doing, and we don't want to, so for this deck, I didn't attribute too many defensive cards because I still want to make big turns with Peter Parker to, you know, remove threat, to put damage on Venom Goblin. So I don't have any more resources up, like allocated for defense stuff. This is kind of just the bare minimum to keep us alive and to keep us going. So yeah, that's kind of what this deck is centered around. So we have 3 copies of Hard to Ignore because we can't have 3 copies out at the same time, and it's going to be helpful to remove 1 threat from the main scheme for each one, right? So at max, we can be taking out 3 threat every single turn that we are able to play backflip and Defiance, right? we will not be able to play backflip and Defiance every single turn, which is one major thing that I think is a big weakness of Perfect Defense, is that it's impossible to block out the damage every single turn from a villain unless you get lucky and you're getting into those defense events, right? So we're not going to be able to block it out every single turn because we won't have a backflip or Defiance every single turn. And it turns out we don't. We want to have an ally block or just have Spider-Man basic defense with his defense of 3. But yeah, in terms of we are able to get a backflip and Defiance, we can trigger the Hard to Ignore and the Inflammables. So we have 3 copies of Hard to Ignore in the deck, 3 copies of Defiance to increase that consistency, and we also have 2 copies of Unflappable. And I think that, so Inflammable is max 1 per player, so I'll never get 2 copies of this card out, but it's very useful because this is a key card in this deck, but it's not like a super duper key card, right? So if the feud is looking really nasty and I need to like pay attention to something and I need to clear off a side scheme, and I drew my Inflammable, I may have to use it as a resource so I can control the board for a second. And then if I discard the Inflammable because I use it as a resource, then, and if that's the only copy in my deck, then I won't be able to get it back for a whole deck pass. And I'll be missing out on that Perfect Defense, on the extra card draw for a lot of turns that I'm able to play the backflip and Defiance. So I don't think that it's bad to have 1 copy of it, but for this deck, I definitely want to have 2 copies just to increase that consistency and me being able to draw it and being able to throw it away as a resource if I need to, especially early game, because Venom Goblin will deal us those 2 phase down encounter cards right here when the game begins on expert mode, right? So I'm definitely someone that does not mind having multiple copies of a card in a deck if there are no better alternatives, right? I think that's going to be a key thing, is just having better alternatives. And if you don't have it, then just put multiple copies of that card in. Even though you can only play 1, you can always use extra copies. So if I already have the Unflappable down and I draw another copy of Unflappable, I can always just use it as a resource, right? It sucks that I can't play it again, but in Marvel Champions is kind of the game where it's okay to have duplicates of cards you can't play because everything can be always used as a resource right here with the mental resource to pay for another card. So it's not the end of the world. And whenever I first started playing the game, especially with just a core set as my card pool, I always built my deck with 3 copies of Avengers Mansion. And as you see right here, we still have 2, just because I don't think the other protection cards are going to be as valuable. I will go into that a little bit later. But yeah, so we have 2 copies of Inflammable here, and I would have 3 if we have more deck space. But I want to limit the deck here to just 40 cards because I don't have a lot of allies. I want to make sure that I'm drawing them, and I want to make sure that I'm drawing the backflips, right? So for this deck specifically, I don't want to go over 40, but I think it's completely okay to go over 40 cards if you're building a deck. Don't worry about sticking to the 40, but I really want that consistency of the 2 backflips here, which is why we kept with the 40 cards. So that's why we put Hard to Ignore, 3 copies, 3 Defiance, and then 2 Unflappables here. Okay, and then another key card for us is Jocasta here. So Jocasta is a 3-cost protection ally. She has 2 thwart, which is great for Spider-Man because he needs help with that thwarting. She has 1 attack, 3 hit points, and then she has a response. After Jocasta enters play, choose a defense event in your discard pile and attach to her face down. So this is such a powerful effect because you can choose any defense event in your discard pile, right? And as you guys saw earlier, we have the backflip as a defense event, right? Event keyword, and it has a defense. And then our Defiance is also a defense event. Most of the time, we want to be getting backflip because the backflip is so much stronger than Defiance, and it will just prevent all that damage, while Defiance just prevents the boost card, right? But there are turns where if you're really scared of Venom Goblin getting a boost effect, Defiance may be better in that situation. But usually I'm choosing the backflip here to get with Jocasta just to prevent all damage so I don't die. And with Jocasta, it says you may play the event attached to her as if it were in your hand. So if you put the backflip underneath her, you kind of just have a backflip that you can trigger any single time that you're about to take damage, and that will count as a defense, and you can trigger the Unflappables and the Hard to Ignore with the perfect defense setup stuff. So Jocasta is a really big ally in this deck. And then I'm going to go through all the protection cards that we have here. So Daredevil is also another great protection ally that we have in this deck. And the main reason we have him, his effect's not that useful for us, right? After he defends against an attack, move 1 damage from him to an attack enemy. That's not going to be the most useful thing because he only has 3 life. So he's usually going to be dying if the villain attacks him. So for Venom Goblin, he has 3 attacks. Every single time Venom Goblin attacks and we have Daredevil to block, he will get defeated. He can block off like 1 or 2 damage from minions, but we really want him here for his 2 cost and 2 thwart. So 2 cost is a very, very cheap ally. And being able to Thor for 2, I mean, that is insane for protection because protection doesn't have as much threat removal options as other aspects. And then we have another 2 cost thwarting ally here. So Daredevil Thors for 2, and Jocasta also Thors for 2, which is the main reason why I have these 2 allies here in this deck because of their high thwart to help Spider-Man Peter Parker out. And then the last protection card that I have in this deck is the Night Nurse right here. So it's a 1 cost support. It comes in with 3 med counters. And as an action, we can exhaust the Night Nurse and then remove 1 med counter from her and then heal 1 damage from hero and discard 1 status card from it. So Spider-Man Peter Parker, especially in this deck, we do not have that many ways to ready, right? So if we're ready to do our like final big burst on Venom Goblin, we do not want to be stunned. And Venom Goblin, he is super nasty because he has a he can play webbed up on you. I think that's in the modular set with the symbiotic strength here. So right here, webbed up is super nasty. You attach to your identity. When your hero would attack, discard webbed up instead, and then you are stunned. So it's going to block off 2 activations, so we already need to basically attack to get rid of the webbed up, and after that we get stunned afterwards. So the Night Nurse is really there to help prevent us from getting stunned and getting stifled there because we don't have many other ways to do that. And then another card that will stun Peter Parker a lot is Nemesis the Vulture. A lot of the Nemesis cards from the Vulture's Nemesis set will also stun Peter Parker Spider-Man. So the Night Nurse is there to prevent that, and she'll also heal us for 1 if we need it. And then she's only 1 cost, so she's very, very efficient. Yeah, okay, so those are all the protection cards that we have in this deck, right? We only have 11 protection cards in this deck. Daredevil, Jocasta as the 2 thwart allies. We have 3 Defiance, 2 Inflammable, 3 Hard to Ignore, and the Night Nurse. So that's not a lot of protection cards for a protection deck. And the main reason why is I really, really want to get set up with Peter Parker and I want to have big player turns because Venom Goblin has a lot of threat that we need to remove and a lot of minions and just a lot of stuff that we need to do with the board to try to control it. So the main thing with him is I want to be able to have a big player turn to do whatever I need to do and not focus losing all my cards during the villain phase. So we don't have that many protection stuff. Let's go through the allies next here. So we have Ironheart as a 2 cost ally, and she's a very, very solid ally, right? She's just 2 cost, 1 thwart, 1 attack, very cheap and just good stats for like a 2 cost ally. After you play Ironheart from hand, you can draw a card. So she's a great way for us to just get a body out in the field. She can ping a damage or thwart for 1, which can help us get rid of a minion, knock off Tufts, or thwart for 1 more if we needed to clear off a side scheme, like a nasty side scheme that Venom Goblin has. And she'll also draw us back a card, and we can just use her as a chump block afterwards for turns that we don't have the perfect defense stuff set up, right? So I want to keep this ally in play for that situation where, or keep her in play with 1 hit point for whenever I don't have the backflip or Defiance in my hand, and if Venom Goblin's going to hit me for a lot, I want to have Ironheart defend for us. And then last 2 allies in the deck, these are like 2 of the strongest allies in the game, right? Nick Fury, I mean, in my opinion, he's the best card in the game. 4 cost ally, when it enters play, choose 1. He can remove 2 threat from a scheme, draw 3, or deal 4 damage to enemy. At the end of the round, if Nick Fury is still in play, we discard him. So at the villain phase, at the end of that, we discard him. But he can do all these effects, thwart for 2 or attack for 2, and then still chump block for us, right? So he's just doing so much as an ally for us that he's always going to be really good. And even though we, you know, I mean, even though we want to limit our allies, we have to put Nick Fury in here just because he's the real like big card that's going to help save us and allow us to make a push to either control the board or just do a lot because he almost refunds almost all of his costs by drawing us 3 cards. And then Moon Girl here is going to be the last ally. Moon Girl is not going to be the best with this deck right here just because we're not flipping to Alter Ego that often because we don't have that many ways to remove threat right here in protection. But she's a good 3 cost ally that's going to be really useful if we can draw her in our starting hand, right? So 3 cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 life. Play only if your identity has a champion or genius trait. So Peter Parker only has a genius trait in his alter ego, so that's why we must be an alter ego to play her. And then in response, after you play Moon Girl from hand, draw 1 card for each mental resource used to pay for her. Super duper efficient, just like Nick Fury, getting refunding a lot of her costs and allowing us to play other upgrades and stuff like that down. But we aren't spending too much in alter ego, so she's often going to be a dead ally for us because we don't have the luxury to flip down all the time. But Venom Goblin, he has very high threat thresholds on his 3 main schemes here, right, at 11, 12, and 10. So usually if you're playing a game against Venom Goblin, you have 1 turn where we are able to flip down, right? So that 1 turn that we want to take advantage of flipping down is whenever we want Aunt May to heal us. and that's also when we want to play Moon Girl. So you want to time that perfectly to get that one solid flip to where we don't die by throwing out. And that's all the allies here in the list. And then next, let's go through the resources. So we just have the basic resources here of energy, genius, and strength. And we have a pretty even split of basic cards and protection cards. So I didn't put any of the double resources like the power in all of us or the power of protection because everything's pretty evenly split. And I don't want to be stuck with power of protection if we have like Nick Fury, and I don't want to be stuck with the power in all of us if we have Daredevil or Jocasta. And also the other protection cards like Night Nurse is just one cost, Hard to Ignore is one cost, Unflappable is one cost, and Defiance is 0, right? So those cards aren't going to be, the power of protection is not going to be as useful for us just because a lot of our protection cards are very cheap. And then lastly, actually we're not lastly, but let's look at the supports here. So the supports that we have in a deck are 2 copies of Avengers Mansion, Helicarrier, and Quinn Carrier. And you can definitely be argued that the Ingenuity is a really good card to put in this deck. And I think it's not a bad call to put Ingenuity in this deck because it is a resource generator for only 2 costs, which is really, really good. But this deck just doesn't flip down to Alter Ego enough. Usually, like Moon Girl is such a big high tempo push for us for Alter Ego that she's worth it for that one flip. Versus Ingenuity is not really a tempo push; it's to help us build out a little bit, right? For the extra resource generator. So that's why I think Moon Girl is a little more valuable. Because if you can start the game with Moon Girl in your hand, then I mean that's gonna be a crazy turn where you can have a huge momentum. And that in the middle of the game when you draw Moon Girl, that's whenever I will consider flipping down to get that huge tempo push and to recover and just get everything out. And usually if I draw Ingenuity for this deck against Venom Goblin, it's going to be a little bit dangerous to flip down just to play the Ingenuity, so it's not worth it to flip down to play that card for this deck just because we don't have that threat control. But I think definitely for other decks, Ingenuity is going to be a super duper powerful card. It's just because we don't have that accessibility to Alter Ego. So we really want to draw Ingenuity on the first turn playing this deck, and if we don't get it on the first turn, we kind of won't be playing it anymore. But we have Quinn Carrier as just a regular resource generator for Avengers. We have Helicarrier to reduce the next card that we play by 1. And we have 2 copies of Avengers Mansion. So Avengers Mansion, you can also only have 1 per player. So we won't be able to play another one, but I really, really need that card draw in this deck to get that economy set up, right? The main thing for the strategy that we're doing against Venom Goblin is we want the Gladiator counter on Upper Manhattan here. Because we do not have threat control playing Spider-Man in protection to mitigate all the threat. For Venom Goblin, I think for other scenarios it would be okay, but Venom Goblin just adds so much threat. So we want to keep it on Upper Manhattan here, where the special is to discard 1 card in your hand. So we want to basically every single villain phase trigger this 1 time to where we're constantly discarding card from our hand. So that's why Avengers Mansion is such a key card for us to get out early, because we want to draw that card that we discard, right? We want to still end up with our regular hand size and not be in a deficit every single turn. So getting out the Avengers Mansion and these resource generators are key to mitigating this nasty discard 1 card from hand. So we're really relying on Peter Parker's economy, right? I think another hero may not do as well with this, but Peter Parker already has such high economy with his Spider Sense right here, where you can draw a card whenever the villain initiates an attack against you. He has Scientist and Alter Ego, and then we have all these resource generators here to help mitigate losing a card every single turn and still being viable against Venom Goblin. And the worst one that we can get is this one right here, Lower Manhattan. The special is to place 1 threat on each scheme. So not only do we get 1 threat on all the main schemes here, but we also have to put 1 additional threat on each side scheme, which is completely terrible for us. So we want to try to do our best to keep the active Glider counter away from Lower Manhattan and mostly on Upper Manhattan. And if we have it on Midtown Manhattan, it's to take 2 indirect damage. That's not going to be great for us because we don't have that many allies. So Peter Parker will be taking the indirect damage, and we won't be able to flip down too often to heal with Aunt May. So we really want to prevent as much damage as we can and try to mitigate that with blocking with the allies and playing backflip and Defiance. So yeah, our main thing is Upper Manhattan, which is why we have 2 copies of Avengers Mansion to draw a card, and it's also why we have 2 copies of the Unflappable as well, because we really want to get those cards out as soon as possible, because we need that card draw desperately. And if I have to spend Avengers Mansion as a resource early game to control the board, then I still have 1 other copy in the deck because I have 2 copies in there. So that's the reason why we have that. And the final card that we haven't talked about in this deck is going to be or 2 more cards, I guess. Endurance is another card we haven't talked about. This is just a very simple card, right? It's just a 1 cost upgrade. You get plus 3 hit points. We don't have that many opportunities to flip down to Alter Ego. So Endurance is kind of a cheap way, like a cheating type of way for us to heal, right? because when you get plus 3 hit points, you increase your max hit points by 3. So Spider-Man goes from 10 up to 13 max hit points, but our current hit points go up as well. So if we're at like 2 hit points and we play Endurance, we now go up to 5. So it's kind of like a one cost way to heal for 3 effectively, right? So that's just kind of what this card is for. If we can't flip down to heal and maybe we can play Endurance and get a little bit of HP recovery. And the last card that I haven't talked about is the Meditation. And this card is a little bit weird in this deck. So it's a 0 cost event. It's an alter ego action. Exhaust your alter ego and play a card from your hand, reducing its resource cost by 3. So this is kind of a tough card that we really need in the first turn of the game, right? It's going to be pretty much dead after that because it's an alter ego action. We can only use it in alter ego. But I am desperate with this deck to try to get that early like first turn push, right? So if we can get the Helicarrier or one of the Avengers Mansions or a Nick Fury or Jocasta, or Jocasta may not be that good on the first turn, but we want to get one of those cards out with the Meditation. And I believe in my playthrough, I could be wrong, I haven't watched back, but I believe that we had like a Meditation and Avengers Mansion on our first turn, which is exactly what we're looking for because we want to get that push out in Alter Ego on that first turn. So that's all that's there for. And if there are better cards, I would definitely recommend taking out the Meditation and putting other cards in there. So if I were to slot out cards, right, to make this an ideal deck, I would definitely take out one of the copies of Avengers Mansion, take out an Unflappable, take out the 3 Meditations, and just put in 5 more allies, right? That would be the key thing that I would do for this deck. A lot of people ask me, how could I make this deck better? How could I make it more consistent? And my advice to all of them was definitely to put in more allies, put in the Protection Web Warrior stuff as well, right? I purposely played this deck without Web Warriors because I want to show that Peter Parker didn't need to rely on one of the strongest traits in the game, which is the Web Warrior trait with like Ghost Spider and Spider UK and all those, and Silk and all those strong Web Warrior allies, right? So that's kind of the only reason that I restrict this deck from doing that. But if you're playing without restrictions, I would definitely recommend adding the Web Warrior cards and adding those allies and just taking out the Meditation and these duplicates here. But the reason why I have the Meditation and the duplicates of Avengers Mansion and Unflappable is, in my opinion, it's okay to have extra dead cards in your hand if it gives you a huge tempo push, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. Or if it gives you a huge push in being able to mitigate something for your strategy, right? So the Meditation here gives us a huge tempo push in being able to play a card, reducing cost by 3, and then it's dead pretty much after that. And the Mansion and the Unflappable are desperate card draws that we need to mitigate the Upper Manhattan main scheme, because that's a strategy going into Venom Goblin with this deck, is to constantly trigger this special right here. So that's kind of the strategy with it, and that's kind of why this deck was built this way with those specific restrictions. Yeah, and I already have a playthrough with this deck against Venom Goblin. I've only played this deck one time, and I've only played against Venom Goblin, so you know, it may have been a luck factor there as well, but I do feel like this deck is pretty strong, and it could definitely take down other scenarios that aren't Venom Goblin at a very consistent rate. And I do feel like, I don't know, I feel like it was a pretty good game against Venom Goblin as well, to where it wasn't like a super, like, you know, super duper lucky game or something like that. But yeah, I will post a link of that video of the gameplay with this deck against Venom Goblin in the description of this video. And yeah, that's kind of the explanation of why I put every single card in this deck. And hopefully I am not forgetting something, but I think that explains kind of why I went through this deck strategy for against Venom Goblin. It was really showcasing and relying a lot of Peter Parker's backflips and just relying a lot on his economy to counter Venom Goblin, because that was the two main things that we're building around here. It's just having the economy to discard card every single turn with Upper Manhattan, because Peter Parker has such high economy, and being able to play backflips to get the Unflappable and Hard to Ignore us off, so the perfect defense strategy off, without investing too much in it, right? So we don't even have the Armored Vest, which gives your hero +1 defense. We don't have Desperate Defense. We don't have a lot of the protection cards because I don't want to invest too much in it. I want to keep more supports and upgrades, and I want to have these allies out here. So that's kind of why I think Peter Parker is really good with this protection build, because we don't have to invest too much in it, and you can still have big, powerful cards during the player phase to play and control the scenario. And yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of this deck. And yeah, I think in multiple times throughout the video, or throughout the playthrough with this deck, I said multiple times where I was like, man, it would be really nice if I had an extra ally right here, because I mean, allies are so powerful in Marvel Champs if you're facing the hard difficulties, They give you so much versatility to just do one extra damage to a minion, to ping off a tough, to do one extra thought removal to help you clear off that side scheme, right? They help you control everything to where, like, you know, if you have 5 threat on a side scheme and you can only thought for like 3, the minion can either do 2 or 1 threat or whatever you need to like make those numbers hit perfectly, right? So allies are so good, and restricting to you know, 6 allies is, I know a lot of people still consider 6 a lot, and I could definitely see that, but restricting myself to only adding 5 allies to his deck, right, and Black Cat as the identity specific that's required to put in the deck, I felt very restricted not having that versatility to be able to thwart and do extra pings of damage wherever I need it. So if you are playing this deck, if you want to have fun and you want to defend a lot with Peter Parker, then you know, this deck build I think it's fine, but it's definitely not the most optimal way in my opinion to play Peter Parker. You definitely want to have more allies because he can easily pay for them with his with all the resources that he has and his high economy. So yeah, definitely putting in web war allies would be great, and doing yeah, and just taking out the meditations and the extra duplicates of Avengers Mansion and Unflappable. And I'm not sure if I have um, let's see, I think I might have said here, yeah, so, okay, yeah, I just said the restrictions in the deck, but so if I were to add anything else to this deck, I would definitely put in Silk. I would definitely put in Spire UK. I would definitely put in the Web of Life and Destiny. I would definitely put in the War of the Great Web, and I would put in probably just one more protection ally, probably like Starhawk. Starhawk would be really good. Um, Actually, no, scratch. I would put in Web Warriors, right? So I would put in. So if you were to play this deck and you want to play a little more optimally with more Web Warriors, it would be, so the 5 cards that we would take out, right? We would take out Meditation, take out a copy of Mansion, take out a copy of Unflappable. So we would put 5 cards back in. Put the Web of Life and Destiny, Spider UK, Ghost Spider, Spider-Man Hobie Brown, and maybe just Silk. So maybe we wouldn't even put in the War of the Great Web there. So just a bunch of Web Warrior allies here. And Silk and Spire UK you can play without having a Web Warrior card. The only thing is going to be a Hobie Brown and a Ghost Spider. But Hobie Brown has that that 2 thought that we like. And then Ghost Spider can help us tutor a backflip in identity specific event, so she can get us a backflip to her hand or a swing weapon whenever she leaves play. So that's kind of what I would do if I wanted to optimize this protection build a little bit more. And definitely, I mean, you could also put in the Ingenuity and also War of the Great Web if you want to take out some copies of, like, maybe take out an Endurance or maybe take out like Ironheart or something like that. But yeah, that's where I would go with this deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative and helpful, and I hope that this is kind of like a gives you guys a good idea of what my mindset goes through when building a protection deck. Just because I do think that protection does have a lot of limits in how it thwarts. So I want to be able to control a lot of the threat going on the main schemes if I am playing protection. Yeah, hope you guys found this video helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. If you have any questions or anything, just post it down in the comments below, and I'll definitely respond and get to it. But I'll post the deck list in the description, and I'll post the gameplay with against Venom Goblin also in the description. So I'll see you guys in the next video.